Aloha and welcome to DDD's HCBS Community Integration Final Rule Best Practices for Providers. This webinar series with IDD providers will share their experiences in moving to and implementing person-centered practices consistent with HCBS Community Settings Final Rule. Hear from IDD providers from across the nation as they will offer examples and advice. We hope you enjoy this webinar series.
Through the Q&A. I thought we'd start actually maybe asking Lynn and Marion your thoughts on coming out of COVID, especially in the pandemic, and kind of the opportunities that have been created by the changes that have had to occur over the course of the last year, both good and bad. What ideas do you have for providers who are trying to think about how do we take our current reliance on some of the center-oriented day services and or congregate services that you both talked about? And really, what would be some of the first things that you would think people should be thinking about in terms of concrete steps to move towards more individualized services? Mary, do you guys want to jump in?
Well, I can just say that I think Anne spoke to this, that, I mean, we are a year with a center-based operation that has been closed and has found other ways to engage people and support people in things they want to do. So I think this year has provided us with an opportunity to explore other ways of supporting folks. So it's a brand new day. I mean, why go back? You can see that in non-disability services. Will there be as much office space rented? Probably not. You know, I think that we are going to configure things differently as a society. So why should disability services be left out of that? And again, I think the first step, this is based on our experience, is to decide on what your organization is going to value, to believe in, and to be. And then what are the first steps you need to take, because it looks different depending on where you are and how big you are and your funding, all of that. You know, you just start moving ahead one step at a time, but you've got to decide first.
I would say what our experience has shown, and I said we also offer support broker services, which is where we assist people who are directing their own services or the services of their family members. We've seen incredible growth since the onset of COVID. You know, day programs had to close, rightfully so. They're not safe. And so it's no judgment zone, but it's, you know, we would assert that the more control one has over where they live, who they live with, who's coming in and out of their home, what kind of support they're providing, how that's being provided, it certainly doesn't prevent people from becoming ill. We know that, but it certainly minimizes. It minimizes the risk. And, you know, we had family members say from the outset, we don't want anybody coming in. So how are we going to work this out? Well, we've always been an agency that's hired family members, and that's a whole other discussion, right? But wow, did that work well in this time? Now it requires a different level of supervision. It requires a different level of communication. But these family members who also, many of whom became unemployed. So think about that, right? You know, like the head of household loses their job because of this pandemic. So now we've got loss of income. We've got, you know, a family member with a disability whose whole life and routine has been disrupted. So for many people, it was and could have been disastrous. So I think using this tragedy in so many ways, but looking at the opportunities it presents to do things, yeah, maybe differently, but not just different to be different, or not just different because the final rule says we have to do it, but because it makes sense for the person, for their family, for their communities.
Great, thank you both. I know that another question that has come up, and we've discussed this in other webinars, is this question of certification and licensure agencies. And again, I think it is the intent of Hawaii to move towards an alignment in terms of certification and licensure. But at the end of the day, we know that providers can do a lot of the work in terms of ensuring individualized approaches that are compliant with the settings rule. So I think, we are continuing to engage on the rulemaking processes to ensure that providers are supported. But I think, that the expectations that have been laid out under the settings rule and the requirements for Medicaid payment have been pretty clearly articulated. Mary, it looks like, did you want to jump in?
I put my hand up. That works. So yes, in answer to that question, we are working, I think, particularly around the DD DOMs and the arches are the programs that are not completely under DDD, auspices, if you will. We are aligning the adult foster home rules, those regulations, but the others are things that we are committed to work on with OCA. But while I have the mic, Marion, I really liked your slide on the new economics foundation kind of continuum. I don't know if we can put that back up quickly, but just, for me, it's checking every action, every decision, every relationship and interaction. It doesn't, it's good if we have internal policies and program commitments that align with that, but just starting to look at, the values of our relationships and our decision-making, the programmatic day-to-day stuff, are we truly in that category where we're, where we're doing with, or are we still doing to, where we're making the schedules, where we're tightly controlling the activities, where we're not letting go and honoring kind of the what we've been trained on in terms of the dignity of risk, but really when it goes back to what Lynn was saying, having a true human rights agenda. I think that all of us could kind of print this and put it on our wall as we make programmatic decisions with people. So again, it's just changing that language and making sure that we're, especially in this space where we can be more creative and have more opportunity and have permission through the community integration final rule and our direction in DDD, that we are moving much more toward the doing with in everything that we do. So that's
one of the questions that's come up is this question around people with the most significant support needs and engagement through telehealth and individualizing services for individuals who have may not use traditional language, may use behavior as part of their communication toolbox. And I'm wondering, Lynn, I know that, I love the fact that you thought that quote unquote higher functioning people would be easier to start with. And I'm just wondering if you can talk a little bit about some of the creative ways that you have supported both staff and families to hold people to higher expectations and to think about the capacities and opportunities among people who are frequently labeled as more severely disabled. And I have my camera off, but if you could see me saying that, I'd be putting it in the air quotes.
Right. Well, I mean, it's so true, isn't it, that as long as this industry has been around, we chronically underestimate people with disabilities and rarely overestimate people with disabilities. So starting there, and why is that? And, some of that is probably how we're enculturated about the values that from a young age around beauty and intellect and being smarter is better and all of that kind of stuff. So unpacking that, and I think that just starts within the culture of an organization. But what we have found is supporting people with more complex support needs, or whether they be medical or otherwise, is that it is actually the choices that are made and the directions that people want to go are fairly modest. Just being able to be in your apartment alone, even though you may have aspiration issues or you have a feeding tube, but on every hour you can have 10 minutes with no one there and everyone says you're safe. That's really easy to do. Or to sit by the dryer when it's running because you like the vibration, or eat pizza for breakfast. So what? And in regards to communication, what we have found is there are people that love people. And so we start there. How can we learn what you have learned? And if in some instances where that isn't as rich, then it's our job to figure out, and that's trial and error. I think Marion would say that too, that it's trial and error until you do figure it out. Oh, and it's the same about anything. Do you like opera? Well, most people with disabilities are very experience poor. So, let's go to an opera. Oh, you thought it sucked? Okay. All right. Opera's off of the list. So I think you can just apply that same kind of thing in terms of, those kind of just daily life choices,
Marion, did you have anything you wanted to add to that? It looked like you were
Yeah,
confident.
my nonverbal communication. Yeah, no, I was agreeing with obviously what Lynn is putting out there. And I would say too, that the whole notion of experience poor, because somehow we've been trained to believe that it's like, we got to get this right before we do anything. And it's like, well, is that the way most of us live? Like, don't we? I don't know. I mean, I learn more by the mistakes that I make. Somebody telling me not to do something usually signals to me I absolutely must do that. And that's not always a good thing, but I then typically learn not to continue doing it. I think the other point is that presuming competence. Somewhere along the way, I don't know who decided that just because somebody doesn't use their speech to communicate, that somehow that means they A, have nothing to say, and B, that what they would say really wouldn't, make any kind of sense. Like, that's just so insulting a concept. And I think the people that we work for, many of whom use their behavior. We don't even call it behavior support plans anymore in our organization. We call it communication support, because we know now that behavior is communication. So why are we going to do something in the name of treatment that ultimately isn't going to help? It may keep some people employed, but it's obviously not helping people. How can you have a plan around something for decades And it's the same thing. So I think there's something about seeing the person as the expert. Even if you've got to convince yourself, just do it. Just try it with one person. Somebody that you would, you know, you look at and you think, oh man, probably, you know, especially if their IQ is noted somewhere, right? Like, just go against the grain and just say, I am going to treat this person as the expert that they really are, and just kind of see what happens.
Running up against the clock here, and I will turn it back over to Abby. And I just wanted to express my appreciation to all three of you for taking your time today, answering questions, sharing your perspectives. I think this has been super helpful, and just really grateful for everyone's time.
You're welcome, Sharon.
Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you.
And I think we'd love to have you talk to us again. That's very good. Thank you.
All right, everyone. This concludes our formal presentation for today. If you would like to access this recording and the other previous waiver provider trainings that we have hosted, you may go to our website at health.hawaii.gov/DDD. If you go ahead and click on our website, on the right-hand side, you will see the waiver providers drop-down menu. Go ahead and click, and then you will be directed to the waiver provider training link. And the list of all the presentations are available for you folks to view. All right, if there are any questions, our CRB team is ready to accept all your questions via email. So if you need to contact us, feel free to email us at doh.dddcrb@doh.hawaii.gov. Thank you, everybody. Have a good day.
Bye.
Thank you for joining DDD's HCBS Community Integration Final Rule Best Practices for Providers webinar series. We've hoped you enjoyed all the lessons learned from our guest speakers. For more information about DDD's efforts towards final rule compliance, please email doh.dddcrb@doh.hawaii.gov. Mahalo.